Intense combat, a complex upgrade system, massive, rewarding, and confusing in some cases, boss fights. Also, I died. I died many times. Demon's Souls Remake is a release title for the PlayStation 5 and a complete remake, not remaster, of the original 2009 classic, but should you play it? If you have any questions that I don't answer in this video, please leave them in the comments below and I'll happily get back to you. Now, let's get into it. So for this review, I decided to take the perspective of a new player for a couple of reasons. For one, I am technically a new player to Demon's Souls. I've played all the other FromSoft titles, but I've never played Demon's Souls myself. And the second reason is that I feel that there's going to be a lot of people looking for brand new titles to play on their fancy new toy, being the PlayStation 5, who haven't played a Souls-like game before and been wondering how this game really stacks up and if they should play it. So hopefully I can answer that question for you today. Firstly, from the moment you boot up this game, you'll immediately notice the game is completely stunning graphically, which obviously comes from Bluepoint Games having developed this remake from the ground up for the next generation hardware. So realistically, we do get the best level of detail in the world, and even the view distance is just not really achievable on the older systems. Demon's Souls showcases what next gen can be as we continue to progress next gen with this insane view distance, the high level of detail in the characters, not necessarily the characters close to you either, the characters in the distance as well as all the textures in the distance just have that amazing level of detail that you don't really get in the LOD distances on the current gen hardware. I also can't remember a time when I was looking at a texture or a character that looked flat. Everything in the world looks 3D. It has its own shadows and lighting bouncing off it, and it all looks fantastic. Demon's Souls also has a cinematic and a performance mode. While the cinematic mode looks great, and it is native 4K at 30 FPS. The benefit of the performance mode, which is the 60 FPS version, is just too good to pass up, and the game is crisp and smooth in the dynamic 4K 60 FPS version, which is what I highly recommend that you play the game on. Regardless of the version you choose, the load times here are basically non-existent. It's like a 5-second fog screen and then you're immediately in the new area, which is exactly what we expected from next gen, which makes grinding in this game especially easy, as well as moving between the arc stones quickly. It's also worth mentioning that in my 25 plus hours, I experienced multiple crashes or issues when I couldn't actually open the game after turning my PlayStation 5 on. I had to reboot the console again, then reopen the game. This can be contributed to the fact that it's not only a new game, it's also completely new hardware, but it is just worth calling out. Demon's Souls is one of the first Souls-like games that have a native 60 FPS mode on consoles, which is a huge benefit for a game like this and the combat flow. For someone who hasn't played a Souls-like game before, Souls-like games generally have common elements, and Demon's Souls is no different here. High-risk combat with hard-hitting enemies that work together around you in an ever-changing environment to add difficulty. Very few checkpoints, being the arc stones in this case, and a Souls mechanic for your upgrades. Every enemy will drop an amount of Souls, which you then use as a currency for all of your weapon and character upgrades. If you die, you will lose all of those souls and you'll have to go back to that location to retrieve them. I'm no stranger to this mechanic, but something that seems the future games in this genre have improved on is adding shortcuts to bosses and also having more checkpoints throughout each level, which is severely lacking in the first title, being Demon's Souls. This really adds to the frustration felt in the experience when you do die to a hard boss and you have to defeat multiple enemies just to get back to that boss, and in some cases those enemies themselves aren't actually that easy, and there are many boss encounters where I died and I had to try and run back to the boss with no real shortcut, having to take on these encounters and actually dying before I got back to the boss. This is something that is corrected in the future titles, and I can see why, but it is something worth calling out for new players that, look, you're going to have to be running back to bosses when you do die to them, and there's going to be enemies in your way, and it can be frustrating to do this on a repetitive basis when you do get stuck. However, these boss fights and the general combat itself is as great as you would expect in a Souls-like game. Some of these bosses are surprisingly easy. However, the huge standouts here are the more interesting puzzle-based bosses, or the typical Souls bosses where you're trying to learn their mechanics and their movesets so that you can best them in a one-on-one fight. Most of the bosses here, probably like 80%, are fantastic. basic. The other 20% either have a huge difficulty spike when you get to them or are extremely easily, especially for where they are placed in the game. I found basically the whole of the Valley of Defilement to be a complete walk in the park, especially some of those later bosses that you do face in those encounters. However, this is kind of due to the way in Demon Souls how you can take on most of the bosses in any order that you like, which is a huge difference to a lot of the future titles in this genre. If you do get stuck in an area or on a boss, you can at any time jump into the Arkstone and switch to any of the other 4 Arkstones, so you can progress them all individually. As a beginner player, this is probably one of the best features that you can expect, as it allows you to grind levels and weapon upgrades while still feeling like you're progressing and you're not just grinding the same enemies over and over again. Most Souls games have a standard grind period after the early game, so you can take on some of those difficult challenges, and having this option to switch between the Arkstones and the enemies you're fighting really enables you to feel a sense of progression while making that grind a little bit easier. The key takeaway to remember is that if you are someone who gets easily frustrated and always shouting at your TV because you totally didn't get hit there and you totally killed that bad guy, you're going to have a bad time here regardless. Now let's take a break for a second and talk about the sound of Demon Souls.
Strength be granted so the world might be mended. Soul of the lost withdrawn from its vessel.
The soundtrack is great in the moments where it really kicks in, like when you enter a boss fight and the music really ramps up and you're like, hell yes, let's do this. These moments are definitely the highlights. However, through most of your typical exploring, the music is often quiet or non-existent, which is fine. I don't think it takes away from the experience, as this is an intense combat-focused experience and you are really focused on the action that you're performing. So it's just worth calling out that there are times where there isn't actually any backing music. Voice acting, well, there isn't really a lot to talk about. There is very, very little dialogue in this game, with many of the lines being repeated as you are talking to the same people for the same reasons. I'd just say it's fine overall. It's not really a standout. It's just there with what is there, and it doesn't take you out of the experience, but there is very little voice acting as a whole. The new DualSense controller will also make sounds as you make contact with enemies or objects or other little sounds throughout your gameplay, which is cool, I guess. I never really understood the need to have a controller make sounds, especially when Sony themselves are trying to sell you a 3D audio headset with the new console. So how are you supposed to hear these sounds coming from the controller if you're wearing the headset that they are trying to sell you? Which is fine, and I played most of the game wearing a headset, so I didn't hear these sounds, but they are there. It's just a sound coming out of your controller. If that's something you're interested in, then it's there, I guess. If you are interested in the other features of the new DualSense controller, the haptic feedback is here. It is minimal and barely noticeable, which in my opinion is good. As my personal opinion, I don't really enjoy the haptic feedback. It can be turned off in the settings too if you do wish. The new rumble, however, is fantastic, especially in the quieter moments where you do get that really sensitive, tiny vibrations, like when you're traveling on an elevator or some of the other movements in the game. Those really small vibrations are fantastic, and that extra rumble capabilities of the controller is fantastic. If you are a veteran Demon Souls player, as for what's new with the remake, Bluepoint have added some new weapons and armor for you to find. There isn't really any new content overall. The mysterious 6th Arkstone is still destroyed. There is some difference in the weight of items in your inventory, especially grass. A lot of the more advanced grass is significantly heavier here, so if you're carrying some, it will actually weigh a fair bit, but it is more or less the exact same experience from the PlayStation 3 Demon Souls, just completely remade with a new score, new graphics, and of course a new console. My overall verdict for you is really in two different camps. If you're a Souls veteran, this is a day one purchase. Demon Souls is a fantastic Souls game, and even though it's a 2009 remake, playing this game for the first time didn't feel outdated or unenjoyable. I loved the challenge, the world, and I even slightly understood what was happening in that crazy story, which is fantastic compared to Dark Souls, which I have no idea what's happening most of the time. The other side of the coin is if you're looking for something to showcase your new console and you have no Souls experience, you should probably wait for a sale. The game is great, but what worries me here is that if you haven't played a Souls-like game before and you're looking to pick this up, it can be extremely frustrating with the difficulty. There is no difficulty settings. There is a convoluted weapon upgrade system, and it requires you to grind regularly to get your soul level up so you can take on those harder challenges. There is difficult boss fights and mechanics that practically require you to look up a guide, and which you should probably check my starter class guide and my tips video. I'll have links to those at the end of this video. However, with all of that aside, if you are interested in a challenge and really want to take this on and you love an experience that you haven't had before, Demon's Souls is a great showcase of what the next generation can be, and it gets me excited for what's to come as this generation matures. If you'd like more Demon's Souls content, be sure to check out my starter class guide, which I'll have a link to on the screen so that you can choose what kind of a play style you're looking for in Demon's Souls. Please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and on Twitch, where I stream 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday Australian night times. Hope to see you guys there in the next stream. Thank you for watching this video. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.